So I'm here to talk about protecting your accounts, right? So I'm going to use a lot of terms and jargon, but with passwords and multi-factor authentication, this is something that a lot of people describe as a password plus something you know, plus something you are, or something you have. I don't generally like to use those analogies because things kind of get mixed up in the meaning of what that could be. So I try to say that a password is behind the first door of authenticating you to a email or other account like your social media accounts. And behind a second door would be the second factor. And both of these things cannot be behind the same door in order to be considered multi-factor authentication. So if your password's in the same place as this second factor, that would be considered just behind one door, wouldn't it? And it wouldn't provide as much protection as something behind a second door. And I will describe a lot of these things to you on like different ways of what that second factor could look like, plus a password. The reason why this is happening is because if you probably already know that a lot of companies have a lot of data breaches, and a lot of it can be surrounding the fact that your passwords could leak in these data breaches. And if you have particular sets of passwords that are shared among accounts, attackers can do something called credential stuffing, where they will take the same password that they found leaked somewhere else and try to log in with a different service that you may have with the same password and kind of try different accounts you have. So that's why multi-factor authentication is great, because even if someone had leaked your password or a company had a data breach, that attacker or hacker or anybody that is maliciously trying to get into your account would need that second factor in order to actually get into your account. So it wouldn't really matter if they had your password. So that's why this is offering that amount of protection. MFA is not new. There's new ways to do it, but some of you may have worked for corporations before where you had to have like a little token on your keychain where it was like a 6-digit rotation that you had to like log in with in order to actually get into a system. So if you remember those, this is pretty much like the newer implications of that. You likely already do 2FA, and I say ATMs and PIN codes are kind of like what your introduction could be for 2FA. A lot of the times, in order to extract cash from an ATM, you need to know the PIN code. A person can't just have your card and walk up to an ATM, stick it in and get money. They need to know the PIN code. So that's kind of like a form of two-factor authentication, because you have something, your card, and you know something, your PIN code. So that would be a preliminary precedent for 2FA in your life if you need some sort of like understanding on how to like apply this to online accounts. So I'll go with this in levels. So level 1, for multi-factor authentication, certain accounts out there, say your bank account, may ask you, do you want a code texted to you in your settings or something like that, or a code emailed to you in order to log into your account? So that may have happened to you before in different ways. I'm using a bank account as an example. So that would be called a one-time temporary token or pass code or number that's sent to you. It's the easiest level of 2FA to use. It's dependent though on network, obviously, because if something's being sent to you, it's either dependent on your cellular network to give you that text message, or it's dependent on some sort of like Wi-Fi or network to actually send that email to you. So you do have to wait between that time of being able to connect to some sort of cellular data network or Wi-Fi or cellular SMS or text message to be sent to you in that code. So what will happen is you'll log in, you'll put in your password, and then the service will ask you for that second code that was either emailed or texted. And I usually introduce people to this level because it's the easiest to use, it's the easiest to onboard when you're thinking about second factor authentication. There's some implications with this. That a lot of people don't consider this the best method of 2FA or the most secure, but I often tell people, if this is what you're most comfortable with using at first, go ahead and try it out. It's whatever you can get comfortable with first, and you can always level up later. As you get comfortable with one method, you can bump it up to level 2 or level 3, as I will discuss. Level 2 is something called a time-based one-time password, or TOTP. I try my best to stay out of security alphabet soup, but unfortunately it will happen from time to time. There's a lot of acronyms in security, I apologize. TOTP, or time-based one-time passwords. Usually you'll use a third-party application that you have to download on either your Android-based phone or your Apple iOS-based phone, that they will ask you. These applications could be Google Authenticator or some other free authenticator app that the service will ask you to download. Most likely, they'll provide a link if you do this route. And what happens is you scan in usually a QR code on your phone from the services to scan this in on the app, and the app will pick it up. And then you will see these 6-digit codes pop up with the name of your account associated with it. You can change the name in the app for your own recognition if need be, but usually there's a name just associated with the service. Say, Chase Bank or something like that in these example accounts. And you'll see these 6-digit codes that the service will ask you. So usually what ends up happening is these codes change around every 30 seconds. So that's why it's time-based and only one time. And they keep going for every 30 seconds. And so even though the setup may be a little bit more complicated, what's better is that this is offline. You don't need to have a network connection to wait for someone to send something to you. And there's no registration needed beyond that, or sharing of personal information anyway, like your phone number with the service. You can just download this app. The service will ask you, like say your email, to scan the QR code, and all of this is offline information. It's just time-based. It's based off math in the background on confirming this code. Once you log in, you'll put in your password and you'll put in the 6-digit code. Now, don't get too scared about the fact that when 30 seconds is up and then it changes, sometimes you can enter in because there is some lag between the 30-second intervals. So don't feel like you have to race. And if you have to put in the next one, you just have to put in the next one. I use this a lot in my own settings as a good backup. And once you do this method, they'll likely ask you to download a set of backup codes, which I'll get into later. But I just wanted to kind of just focus in this aspect for now on the level 2. So level 3, security keys. So the most popular brands of security keys are YubiKey and Google's Nitro Key. What are these things? So I have one here. Oh no, let me put it in front of me. There we go. So this is a security key. You put it into your laptop or computer usually. There's different other capabilities that these guys provide, like even in your phone, you can tap it to your phone. That's called NFC, or near field communication. But mostly you would plug it into the USB ports that you see on your computer once you log in. So the most popular brands, like I said, are YubiKey, which is what I have. I have a whole bunch here. I have 4 or 5 of these things. I really love them. They're not new. These guys are new, but security keys are the ancestors, or not the ancestors, but the offspring of something called hardware security modules that you probably saw in corporations, maybe, where it had to stay plugged into a certain machine and there was like a whole ceremony behind it. But now there's way cheaper HSMs, that's what I call them, that exist now for your own use to authenticate and log in. The good part of these things are that they're on your person. You don't have to open up your phone in order to actually use this. There's no extra app needed for this. You just register it with the service when you opt for a multi-factor authentication or 2-factor authentication in the system, in the settings. Likely will be behind security settings. A lot of online accounts have been better about splitting up between security and privacy settings. So when you turn on multi-factor authentication or go to it, you'll have that. I'll share a link as well with Kate that helps you find if your service has 2FA for easier navigation. So no extra app needed. Interaction with the key is only needed in order to log in. So there's this like, let me put it here. It's like this little circle. It'll light up usually when you plug it in when you're logging in. And there's a whole system. I'm not going to get into the math and the magic behind it, but it's something called FIDO 2. It's an open protocol that's newer and works with these. So what ends up happening is if you plug it into the USB port into your laptop and you've registered the key with that service, what will end up happening is this will light up, this little circle, at least with YubiKeys. I don't know how Google Nitro does it, but I imagine they have a similar mechanism. And you tap it. And so you will log in, you put in your password, and it'll say, hey, tap this guy, tap, and then you'll be logged in. The good thing about these keys are that everything that's on the key that's supposed to be private stays on the key. It doesn't leave it. No one's cracked these, and it's very tough to crack them. And it would take years, usually computationally. So that's why this is considered like the most secure method in terms of using these. You could do a short or long tap. That's for like different situations, but usually just tap it when it lights up. And then even so with phones now, you can take your phone if you have it registered somehow, and with an account on your phone, you can tap. And usually the NFC sensor to tap is usually in the upper part of the phone, not the bottom part. At least on the Android phones that I've used. It may be a little different on iOS, but usually I've seen the NFC sensor be somewhere towards the top. Especially if you're paying with your phone or something like that, usually you have to navigate it towards the top. That's where the NFC sensor is in the device. It's nice to mix with other MFA methods. So if you're not quite comfortable just yet using this alone, and if the service offers different ways to like I said, with the time-based passwords or passcodes, you can mix these two, register a key, have an authenticator app. So that way you don't have to be regulated to just one. Not every service does this, but when it can, it's really nice because I use a mixture of both with a couple things, and you can have that, mixture of security if you want. And you can always, and yes, there is the possibility you could lose these, which is why I like to mix it with other MFA methods. But usually I keep it on my person. Like I said, I have like a little keychain here that I have. I always have to keep my keys on me. I don't take these anywhere, obviously. I usually keep these by my work desk somehow. They're usually hanging up on the side. I take it, I plug in, I tap. Some people just leave it in, they just leave it in the USB port as needed because there's no communication otherwise besides logging in. And it's a nice, it's nice to have. The only drawback is they do cost money. They are not free. The cheapest ones I've seen are around $25, but there are programs and things out there that help people get them for free, especially if you consider a high risk individual, like you're in a domestic violence situation, possibly, and stuff like that. There's different programs that give people security keys in order to protect them. I think Google has a program, but the cheapest ones I've seen are $25 that provide that simple authentication mechanism that you need. And also, they last forever. I've had the same YubiKey for a long time. They're not meant to die, so to speak. So once you get one, it's pretty much, very long term. I've never actually met anyone yet that said their YubiKey died. I've never, came across that. So they're meant to last a long time. I think at least for 10 years, if I'm mistaken. So with that said, they come in different sizes. I have the pictures down here, but the one on the left is usually the typical piece. And they have different ports, like it's USB ports. There's other types of ports on your phone, like USB-C, like the little symmetrical ports. And there's different, they have different ones that have with different computers, like even lightning ports on MacBooks and things of that nature. But usually a USB port is available on most laptops and computers. So that's why I talked about that one in particular. This is a little demo of using a security key. So GitHub is a service that I use, an account that I have for all my code that I have from all my little public code projects, and also for the open source projects that I manage. So I need a high level of security. And so what ends up happening is I have my key in the USB port, I use it, I tap it, and then it logs me in. And this is after I've registered the security key in my settings. So this is what kind of happens each time. And if I don't want to use a security key, say I'm not at my desk and I just have my phone, you'll see a little option of don't have your security key, enter your two-factor code from your phone or a recovery code. So there's different methods of actually being able to navigate this. So I said I was still going to talk about backup codes. That usually happens when you turn on 2FA of some kind or MFA of some kind on your accounts. So remember the principle of two doors, usually with the backup codes, because it'll usually just be a text file that they'll give you or something to copy and paste. And so what I usually do is I copy that text file and I put it on an external drive. If you're feeling fancy, encrypt that drive if you know how. But I usually put that behind a second door because I don't want, say, my backup codes in the same account that could be compromised. So if the user gets past it for some reason on a password or something like that, and I have 2FA turned on and they somehow bypass that, which they probably won't, but you just don't want it behind the same door. That's basically what I'm trying to get at, is that save it on external drive or USB drive, print them out, save them in a locked drawer. You can do that. I know a lot of people make fun of those who put their passwords on Post-it notes, but at the same time, physical security can help in this case, where you can just print them out and save them somewhere hidden away, because attackers can't, unless they're breaking into your house, they can't see these backup codes. So there's that piece, or keep them in some other secure method. Some people have gone so far as put them in a little safe. You know, you don't have to go that far, but just keep them in behind a second door, you know, and or possibly as a secure note in your password manager, which is what I'm going to talk about next. So speaking of password managers, we have a lot more accounts than 20 years ago online. So I've seen a lot of security trainings, people, you know, kind of get reprimanded for having the same password for 10, 20, 30 accounts, but it gets hard to have all of these accounts now and not have some sort of way to actually log into them all. So we have a lot more accounts now than ever. Data breaches, though, are common. And so if someone accessed your password from another account and was able to log into the other 30, that can be problematic. As you can mention, the identity theft scope could be much more impactful than it used to be because of all these accounts, much more information online. But there's a way to protect yourself from the next breach. And so 2FA was the first part of that. The password managers can be the second part of that. And so I'll go through the levels with password managers. So level one could be your browser. So a browser could be your Chrome browser. You could be using Firefox. Some may be using Microsoft Edge, or what you may think to have with Internet Explorer. Microsoft Edge is the rebranded modern Internet Explorer for Microsoft. So if you need to associate those two, that's what that is. But basically any browser, modern browser, usually keeps some sort of method or way to save your passwords. But the basics of this is that there's no extra needed apps. It syncs across devices if you're logged in with a Google account, say, in your Chrome browser, or if you're logged in with a Firefox account or something like that. And it will provide a way of simple setup to actually, you know, save the passwords. So it'll have simple mechanisms like generating a password for you maybe, and saving them to one spot, and even maybe exporting your accounts or deleting them. So what ends up happening there is there's no real other security controls besides the security controls you have on that account that's saving the passwords, right? So that's level one, though. And if you just needed a simple way to like onboard yourself on how to save different types of passwords without having to really think about it, that could be one way. As far as, you know, level two, there's something called standalone password managers. This is different software you would need or download, but it's the best part about password managers that you're usually available across different platforms, your phone and your computer. They can be synced. They have strong protections against compromise, because usually when you set up these accounts, you have to set up a master password in order to log in. So really, you just need to remember one password. set a strong one password, and then what ends up happening is it will log in and fill in the username and password for you that you saved. Just like the typical normal browser password would, but with a little bit more protection. Password managers end up having a lot more security features and controls than just browser password managers. There are security features that alert you to a breach sometimes. I've actually seen someone be protected from a phishing attack online. They shared their story where they had saved their password and their username and their password manager for a particular website. And what ends up happening is these password managers will normally remember the website it was on, detect, and say, hey, you want us to autofill? But when this person went to a certain website that he thought he was on, the password manager didn't pop up and say we wanted to autofill. So he thought it was a problem with the password manager. Turns out it was a phishing link. And the phishing link wasn't the exact website URL match that the password manager knew for that account. So he was actually about to put in his credentials on a similar phishing site link, and was actually about to give his credentials away to a particular party that he had no idea was asking for his credentials. He thought it was the validated service, but since the password manager's website URL detection didn't see it for the username and password, they actually ended up protecting him against phishing. So there's capabilities against that. There are free and paid options. There's also other features saying like, hey, your password's 2 or 3 years old, or this password was detected in a breach, or, you know, these are the accounts you have with weaker passwords versus stronger. And you can kind of manage from there. But a lot of them do offer 2FA setup, but I also talk about the two-door principle. If you have your second factor in the same place as the passwords, I don't really consider that 2FA or MFA because it's behind the same door, once again. But that feature is there in some of them. And here's a little GIF in the corner, kind of simulating what it would be like to make a new password on a site, because usually there'll be an extension you can put into your browser for that password manager. You can have standalone software that you reference, and that way everything can work together. Your phone will have an app likely for that password manager, and you can also use it to log into apps on your phone. So don't worry too much about the fact that you wouldn't be able to access this password manager everywhere, because you usually typically can. And this takes the most overhead of setup, I think, out of all the things that I've said today. But if you sit down and you take the time to learn like which, you know, password manager is right for you, and take some time and set it aside, you'll be able to, you know, get yourself a lot of protection for 20 minutes and save yourself a lot of grief down the road. So this is a short list of password managers. One is called KeyPass XE. It takes a little bit more individual setup than the others, because you'll be a bit more responsible for the database that it generates and everything, and generating that password and keeping everything will kind of be like on that one device usually. You can try to sync databases with that, but I tend not to recommend this for first timers, but more so for more experienced users. The other free versions, well, non-free versions, but sign up required, would be 1Password. I personally use 1Password because it's been the most, I would say, convenient out of the password managers I've used in the past. And the only drawback with 1Password that there is a subscription fee a month. They used to have a free version. It's disappointing that they don't anymore. But that one in particular has been very convenient to use and very helpful. It's a shame that there's no free version anymore. There are other free versions of different password managers like Remember and LastPass. These are other two password managers softwares that you can get for free. You also have to have sign up required, but for the most part, they take you through these steps of not just setting a master password, but needing a key in order to register on different devices and stuff like that, in order to kind of help you make sure that even if someone found out your master password, they wouldn't know that key. And usually what ends up happening, at least with 1Password, they will download that key, save it somewhere on a PDF. Like I said, two-door principle, keep that somewhere safe. Print it out if you need to, and maybe not save it at all on your computer and store it in a drawer, but you just need to know that master key as well as that master password usually. Pick a strong master password. It will be the only one you'll need to know. So it will be something to do when you sit down and actually set out a passphrase, like usually a couple random words with spaces in it that are kind of long. That's actually pretty decent for a passphrase, especially if it's like 4 or 5 words that are just random. We actually have let me try to like bring it up. So EFF.org DICE helps you generate passwords for yourself, and it's really kind of cool. And it explains all that. So I'll put this in the link on like how to choose a strong passphrase for yourself. So there's that piece. So I have some tips for transition to 2FA and password managers. So you start, with your email for 2FA. I usually tell people, a lot of us have Gmail and maybe some other services as well, maybe even Yahoo, but most of the major email providers offer 2FA now. So I would say go in your security settings in your account and kind of check it out from there. But oh yeah, I said I would share the 2FA link that we had to see if your account has it in the first place. Let me see, 2FA directory. I think this is it. Yep, there it is. There we go. So this is a site you can go to see if your account needs 2FA or has it or supports it. You can start with password managers, start with password manager and not the password. I tell people when you talk about password managers, it can be a little daunting, but at the same time, don't worry about if your passwords are weak right now or not. Just go kind of onboard yourself with the password manager, get familiar. I do not have the demo for that for today because I'm running low on time, but at the same time, when you do get set up, usually what ends up happening, you sign up for an account, they'll give you the tools needed for setting up a master password. They'll walk you through the whole situation. And what ends up happening from there is that you'll see later if you have weak passwords or not, but don't worry so much about the state of your passwords now. Don't feel bad if you have multiple passwords for different accounts. Starting with the password manager and choosing better passwords going forward for different accounts that you create in the future helps create more digital health for yourself. So don't worry too much about your previous habits and what you may have. And even if you don't have it all together, if you just utilize 1 or 2 tools, it helps you against breaches in the future. Another website that I tell people to go to is https://haveibeenpwned.com. You can put in your email there and it can tell you whether or not your email was in one of the public breaches that were disclosed by companies. So you'll likely see your email pop up in some breaches, probably older than others. And I say, don't panic, don't worry. I put my email in here and I get breach notifications of something that happened in 2013 or an old account from 2016. And you can do an assessment on wow, was that a really important account? Or was that an account that was just kind of a newsletter that you signed up for of some kind, right? So you'll likely see something associated with the account because data breaches, unfortunately, are very common. And then from there, you can kind of assess okay, how often has my email been impacted by all of this? And so you can assess for yourself of whether or not, what kind of security measures you would need for yourself going forward, as far as establishing 2FA, which will help prevent, this type of thing happening to you in the future of having your passwords. Even if your passwords were leaked, you would have extra protection on your account. And most of these breaches are updated very often on this site. The guy behind the site, I've met him, he's very dedicated to making sure that people are up to date and being able to see, whether or not their accounts were involved in some sort of public breach. But if you have 2FA turned on your accounts, like I said, this wouldn't, be much of an issue going forward. So that's why I tell people kind of assess what's going on with you right now, what you're comfortable with, what level you think you want to go for, and just kind of get started from there. Don't worry about necessarily your old habits. But these are some of the tools that I use to tell people to get onboarded. And if, the 2FA.directory URL that I posted can help you kind of see what services and banks do I use that offer 2FA. Not all banks are kind of behind, so I hate to use them as an example, but emails definitely, and other social media accounts usually, like Facebook offers 2FA, Twitter offers 2FA. So if you have social media accounts in that way, usually you have 2FA available to you. Banks, I think for the most part, they offer, texting a code to you, or text or emailing a code to you of some kind. They're usually behind on the security uptake sometimes, which is unfortunate. So those are the things that I have put out there.